recording. Okay, welcome everybody to this next session of our Kentoneers, and it's always a really lovely thing to listen to our people speaking about themselves and what they do. And we're especially excited about tonight because all three ladies who are going to be speaking are so well known in Kenton and have done such a lot here, and they with their husbands have made a huge impact on Kenton life. What they've all got in common is that they were all chosen to be women of worth, and so that does show you that they have done a lot for our community. Tonight, only one of them is physically in Kenton, and that's Sally, as Lynn now lives in Finchley, and Annette escaped a few days ago to Israel, but of course she'll be coming and going quite a lot. I think we welcome you all and we're very excited to hear you. And I think we will learn some things about you that we didn't know before, so it'll be even more exciting. I'm going to introduce each person, and so I'm going to start with Annette. But at the same time, if you do have any questions, we're going to have the question and answer session at the end. You can write your questions in the chat or hold them until the end when we will, when you can say them yourselves. Okay, so I'll start with Annette. Are you ready, Annette? Annette was born in Hampstead and lived her whole life in northwest London. She is a twin, and together with her sister, she was involved in youth work in her teens. I bet some of you didn't know she was a twin. Annette was educated locally too, in Colindale, Edgware and Hampstead. She has taught at many schools, JFS, Buckingham College, Hasmonean, Emmanuel College. Plus, of course, she has helped many of Kenton's finest students with their Maths O-level, their GCSEs and A-levels. Frank and Annette's two daughters, Deborah and Abigail, were born and bred in Kenton and enjoyed a full and happy life here before they were married. We also enjoyed them being here. They've got involved with a lot of things. As you know, Annette has been heavily involved in communal life, and it all started after Deborah was born. She ran the toddler group, chaired the kindergarten, parents association, did all the things as the children grow up, the Cheder PA and the functions committee. She organised the weeks of welcome that Kenton had with Frank. She was treasurer of the Ladies Guild and chairman for many years, both and other roles, and she organised many events. I remember her being so very organised, with her clipboard, finalising everything. It was wonderful. Her work with the FIWD is renowned over the years, and this includes her organisation of the soldiers' visits to London and all the fundraising events which we all enjoyed. Similarly, she has arranged the Shabbaton choir's visits to Israel. And never tiring, she has volunteered during the pandemic at vaccination sites and also by delivering meals regularly. And for the latter last year, she was awarded as being Volunteer of the Year. She is the very proud grandmother of Leora, Yishal, Michal, and Sophia. Frank and Annette have a home in Netanya, from where she is speaking tonight, and they made Aliyah in September. But they yo-yo backwards and forwards to Kenton, so we hope to see a lot more of them. Annette, unmute yourself. You're welcome.
Hi, everybody. Probably most of you will know a lot of what I'm going to say, but I might have a few surprises for some of you. If you didn't know already, you'll have seen from the poster that there are two of me. A number of you over the years will have told me that you thought you met me in various places, such as Brent Cross, but I was extremely rude because I didn't say hello. But it wasn't me, it was my twin sister. And if you look at the poster that was produced for this evening, you will be able to see there are two photos, and it is absolutely impossible to tell us apart. I was born in Hampstead, and I'm a mirror image identical twin, which means that I am right-handed and my sister is left-handed. Our organs technically could have been on opposite sides of the body as well, but we've found out that they're actually on what one would term the correct side of the body. I spent my whole childhood with my sister. Didn't have a lot of friends because I always had a friend to play with in the house. And when I was very young, I didn't understand what a mirror was, because I would look in the mirror and wave and say, "Hello, Louise," because I assumed I was looking at my sister. And my mother eventually had to explain that there was a mirror and it wasn't my sister. But that's how much I was used to seeing myself. That's how it was. My parents lived in Colindale. My parents, while my dad was alive, lived in one house the whole of their married lives, which was in Colindale. And I went to Colindale Primary School. One of the teachers at Colindale towards the latter end of my time there was a certain Mr. David Band, who, of course, you will all remember from his Kenton days and days eventually as headmaster at Sinai School. David was involved not only as a teacher, but he was also involved in interfaith sports. And my parents were also involved in that. And at various times, my mother had this habit of, once my sister and I was asleep, if there was somebody in the house she wanted to show us off to, she'd bring us up to the bedroom and show us off sleeping. And I know that he was brought up to the room to see how we were doing once he came to the house for a meeting. After I left primary school, I went to Orange Hill Girls County Grammar School. It's a name I can never remember because you had to write it on every sheet of exam paper every year that you were in the school. When we were put into what was now called year 7, but was the first year at school, I was separated from my twin, and it was like having my right hand cut off. I'm the right-handed one, by the way. And I couldn't cope on my own, so my sister had to come and join me in what is now called year 8, in a second year, so that I could actually function properly with her. We followed a very similar path right the way through school. I think we did the same O-levels. We deviated slightly in A-levels, and my sister took geography A-level, which I didn't. She went off on a school field trip. And although I was very well respected in the school, I happened to have been a deputy head girl, I stood by the coach crying my eyes out as a 6th former in what is now year 13, because I'd never been separated from my sister in 17 or 18 years of my life. So I just didn't know what it was like to go to bed without her in the same room at night. We both lived at home, but we went to separate universities in London. I did a maths and chemistry degree, and my sister did a maths degree. So we're very closely related, just slightly different. One of my first few months at university, I was queuing up to buy a cup of coffee. And somebody came over and dug me in the rib and said, "Hey, I'm talking to you. I've been calling Annette and you're not answering me." And I had to explain to them that I wasn't used to being called by my name. I'd spent 18 years of my life being oi you or Twinny, or very rarely Annette, sometimes Louise, but very rarely Annette, except by my mother, who knew us apart. I'm not 100% sure my dad ever really knew us apart as we were little. And I just didn't answer to my name because I wasn't used to it. I didn't have my own identity at age 18. I was involved in youth work in my late teens, and there was a club run at Kingsbury Shore, which is where my parents were members and had friends. And I went not as a member, but as a manager. And I got involved in various committees to do with the Association of Jewish Youth, in Brent Town Hall, and various other committees. And there were various people that I got to know from other youth clubs because they were all on the same kind of committees as managers, or I met them at various events that we took the youth clubs to. One of which was a young man called Frank Weinberg. Friends of ours, you'll all remember Richard Feldman married Michelle, and when they first got married, they moved to Boreham Wood. Now, Richard was heavily involved, as was Frank, in Kenton Youth Club, and spent many happy hours in, it's where the building that was Kulanu, there used to be a youth club there, a small building and in the shul, and they'd run clubs together before. And Richard and Michelle had moved to Boreham Wood, and they started working at Boreham Wood Youth Club. And Richard was looking for managers that he could use and help him run the club in Boreham Wood. And he phoned me up and he asked me if I would like to come and join him at Boreham Wood. I said yes. By this time, I'd finished my degree. I did a postgraduate in education, and I was teaching. So I went along to Boreham Wood, and there was another guy there called Frank, who asked me out. He said to me, I've got some cheap tickets for a dinner and ball. My parents are involved with the Shul Functions Committee, and they haven't sold all the tickets to the dinner and ball, which is next Sunday night. Would you like to come with me? So my first date with my now husband was at a Kenton Shul function. At that function, Rita and Jack were part of the organising committee, and I was dancing with Frank, and Rita was talking to David Band, who was there with his wife Daphne. And Rita said, oh, David said to Rita, I don't know who's dancing with Frank, but I think it's one of a set of twins. I don't know which one it is, but I'm sure I knew them from primary school, and I bet he'll marry her. 10 weeks later, we were engaged. So all my married life, from before I was even engaged, has been involved with Kenton Shul. We did get engaged, but you need to understand that, first of all, Frank's football team had to win the semi-final of the cup. They won the league and the cup that year. And following in family tradition, because his first cousin had done exactly the same the year before, we were then allowed to get married. We got married 8 months after we got engaged at Kenton Shul, with the Kenton Shul choir singing. And to this day, Frank has never forgiven himself. I forbade him to sing with the choir. It was before the days of the extension, so the shul was straight and the ladies' gallery was just straight in front upstairs. The choir stood for a chuppah at the front of the ladies' gallery, about where the Rebbitzin now sits, in that kind of area. And I'd forbidden Frank to sing in the choir because I could just see him vaulting over the side and running down the aisle before I got there. Reverend Jeffrey Schisler married us. He was reverend in those days, not rabbi. He married us, was one of the people that married us, and said to Frank, would you like to sing under the chuppah? And Frank said, no, I better not. And he regrets it to this day. But we got married in Kenton, and our lives started as a married couple, actually in Queensbury, behind what is now B&Q. We were established, we were both working, and after not very long, I found myself expecting Deborah, and I had already told Frank that I was pregnant, and we decided, just between the two of us, without telling anybody, that we would hoping to try for a baby. So we'd move out of a masonette where we were currently living and move into a house. And there was one memorable night when I phoned up my parents and said, do you want the good news or the bad news? The good news is that you're going to become grandparents. Your first grandchild will be born in however long it was. The bad news is we've just sold our flat and we've got nowhere to live. But we bought a house in Kenton Park Crescent, and Deborah was born there. And once Deborah was born and I was no longer working at JFS, I became involved in shul activities, and I joined the Ladies Guild. And yes, I think I helped run the kindergarten, not the kindergarten, the mother and toddler group in Kenton Shul. When Deborah got as far as kindergarten, I did the rotas for security and all the kinds of things that used to happen in those days when Kenton was full of babies and buggies. In fact, one of my strongest memories is that just as I was pregnant with number 2 with Abigail, we were running what was termed a week of welcome. Some of you might remember this. The second one was in 1985. The first one was probably in 1983 or 84. And the week of welcome was run where every night at the shul for 4 nights, there was an activity to do with the shul. Somebody was speaking one day and showed people to Sefer Torah. Somebody showed them around the shul. The choir sang and they had a little concert and various activities, but it wasn't necessarily for our shul members. It was for the wider community. And I have strong memories of sitting in the lounge in Kenton Park Crescent with a BBC computer, who remembers those, typing away letters to various vicars and reverends and various people in the local community, in the local, not our community, but the churches in the local area, inviting them to come into Kenton Shul for our week of welcome, which were 2 very successful weeks we held. The only problem was that during the second week of welcome, on the Thursday night, I gave birth to Abigail. I gave birth at 5:45, and by 8 o'clock, Frank was in shul singing with the choir at the week of welcome. Such is our dedication to Kenton Shul. Over the years, I've been involved with the Ladies Guild as treasurer. I think I was the subs lady first of all, then treasurer. It was something to do with the fact that I could do maths, so I could add up the columns of figures. And then eventually I became the chair. And I'll explain when I gave that up in a few minutes. We were also involved in the functions committee. I think Frank might have been chairman. We ran functions during the year, and one memorable function was a black and white New Year's Eve ball, where everything was black and white, including the tulips on the tables. We were all dressed in black and white. The hall was all decorated in black and white, and the tables were laid with black and white cloths and black and white tulips. And in those days, we're going back to the 80s, we did all the cooking ourselves, whether it was for 200, 250, we did the cooking ourselves. And I have very strong memories of standing in our shul kitchen, cleaning chickens with boiling water and everything else that you needed, with 1 foot on a baby bouncer, bouncing a child up and down, trying to keep them happy while I was busy doing something else. But that's how we all did it. We were proud of us. A lot of us had young children, but we did manage to do that. Eventually, as the children got older, then they went to Kenton Cheder, and we were involved with Kenton Cheder Parents Association, and of course, the infamous Cheder PA plays. I wasn't a performer, Frank was, but I was involved in helping with the catering and on the night, organising the evening. Frank became a warden in the shul from about when Deborah was 10 years old, so from about 1995. And after that, I did a lot of work to help him in the things that he was doing. And it used to be a tradition in the shul, and it's long before we had women of worth. So apologies to Angela and Joyce if you're listening at the moment, but the Chatanim and their wives would have dinner with all the honorary officers. And in those days, we're talking about wardens and financial representative, not lady executive officers or chairman or anything like that. One of the wardens would host in their sukkah the Chatanim dinner. And it's a little bit relevant what I'm going to say next. And I can remember one year when Rabbi Lepra was the Chatan, and we were hosting in our sukkah. Now our sukkah it was in Shaftesbury Avenue by this time, was long and narrow. And as everybody came in and they went into the sukkah, we all said, if you'd like to go and wash, it's probably advisable to wash before you sit down because it's difficult to get in and out. And Miriam Lepra said, no, I'm not going to eat any bread tonight. I'm going to be very, very good. And so she slipped into a seat in the far corner of the sukkah and sat down, and other people went to wash, and we made her motzi and we started the meal. I put all the food on the table and she said, it looks so delicious. Excuse me, everybody, up you get. And she went into had to move everybody out of the table into the kitchen, washed and made a motzi so that she could join in and eat exactly what everybody else was having. She tried to be so good, but I can just see Miriam still smiling and saying, I'm really sorry, but could you all move because I now need to go and wash. It was a typical Miriam kind of thing to do. The shul has played a major role in the lives of my married life and also, of course, in the lives of our children. When I think it was Abigail was about 10, we became involved with British Friends of Israeli War Disabled. And in fact, the first group that we were involved in, we hosted a blind soldier and his companion, who happened to be a piano tuner, and we hosted with a certain Lynn and Andrew stock. We remember it very well, and all I can say is we got involved, and we are still involved, as you all know, in BFIWD. My teaching career has been quite varied. I taught and started my career at JFS. I gave up when I had Deborah, and I tutored at home for about 8 years, every night of the week. 4 nights a week, I might have had 2 or 3 lessons, and there were many, many wonderful children in Kenton that I helped get through their GCSE. I started at O-level, then I progressed to GCSE and A-level. They used to come into the house, and bearing in mind the children were very little, I started tutoring in Kenton Park Crescent and carried on in Shaftesbury Avenue. And we would kind of just about gobbled the last mouthful of our dinner when these students would come into the house. And Frank would traditionally say, here's the tea towel, you've just come in time, you can do the wiping up. Of course, he had to finish the washing up and wiping up because I was then going to go to work and sit and tutor these students. Also, because of Frank's involvement in the Shepperton Choir, for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been heavily involved in helping to organise the trips to Israel for the choir as part of our commitment to Israel. And I've helped organise it and run the trips for the last 2 or 3 years, before COVID, I should add. It's not quite the last 2 or 3 years, the last 2 or 3 trips. Now that I've retired from teaching, having taught at Buckingham College, Hasmonean High School, where I taught on the girls' side, and I was head of section. And when I got that promotion is when I gave up being chair of the Ladies' Guild, because my working life had taken over and I was working long, heavy hours. I'm filling my retirement with some tutoring, a lot of walking, and a lot of volunteering. I was working at Northwick Park Hospital even during the first part of COVID, and since that wasn't required from me, I've been helping at local vaccine centres. I'm sure I've seen some of you when you were coming in to have vaccines in local centres, where I've been helping to marshal people and help people through the process. I also, as Irene mentioned, for the first year of COVID, until end of last August, I was delivering meals once a week, mainly in the London Borough of Camden. We made Aliyah in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur of last year. We've had a home in Israel since 2005. And one of the things that we have done in Netanya is renewed many, many acquaintances with ex-Kentoneites. As Marlene has already said, I was supposed to be going to do a volunteering role tomorrow, and I would have been working with Marlene and also with Lynn Schaffer. Many of you remember Lynn and Stephen Schaffer, who now live down the road from us. So although we are now going backwards and forwards to and from Kenton to Israel and to Netanya, I'm still involved with many, many Kenton people. Thank you.
Annette, that was wonderful. And we're all aware of the work you did, but the amount of it is breathtaking. And thank you so much for sharing all that with us. We're going to move on now. Everyone hold your questions or write them down so you don't forget to ask Annette. And as I said to Annette before, grab a cup of coffee because it's much later in Israel and you might get tired. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Lynn Stock. And here we have another couple very, very involved with Kenton life, as were their children, Harriet and Miles also. I know Lynn's going to be talking about Ireland, so I'm going to just say a bit about what she did in Kenton, and I'm probably leaving some things out. But anyway, Lynn has always been involved with the Ladies' Guild in every way and has been chairman and has other roles also. She's been on the Kenton Board of Management, both as a Ladies' Guild rep and itself on the board. She was involved with lots of the bazaars and the sukkah and many things in the charities that the Ladies Guild was associated with. As Annette has said, the Stocks were also and still are involved with the FIWD as well, and Lynn was involved with Caring Kenton, and indeed it was Lynn herself with Jonathan Lansky who suggested to the Board of Management that we have Women of Worth every year. So well done, Lynn. It was a great suggestion. We're still doing it. It's lovely. Lynn was also on the exec of the Association of the United Synagogue Women. And she's just done lots and lots of things. And something I can't leave out is that she was one of the organisers of the highly successful Kenton Away Days. And that featured so enjoyably for all of us. And we hope one day to do it again. Lynn has an amazing sense of humour, which I'm sure is going to come out in this talk also. So Lynn, welcome. It's wonderful for you to be with us. Do unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Irene. Yes, I'm going to talk about growing up in Belfast, in Jewish Belfast. I just want to tell you that I am very Irish. I'm third generation Irish because my grandmother on my mother's side was born in Cork. My mother's born in Dublin, and my father, although he came to live in Belfast, I think just before his bar mitzvah, he was born in Lurgan, County Armagh. And I myself, as you will hear later, was born and lived for 18 years in Belfast. Now, so I'm going to start now, and first of all, I'm going to thank you very much, Roy and Irene and whoever, Rochelle, for asking me to speak this evening, and also to thank all of you for zooming in to listen to me. Before I start, I want to dedicate this talk to my dear mother, whose Yorkshire ended tonight. I'm going to tell you what it was like to grow up in Belfast as a Jew. But before I talk about myself, I'm going to start with a little historical background of the community. Now, I'm going to try and do a bit of screen sharing here. And I hope you're going to see the picture up here, which I will explain to you. So it's all about the linen industry. It was one of the major industries in the province, and in fact still is today. And in around about the 1840s, German Jewish merchants came to Northern Ireland and established themselves in this trade. One of them was Daniel Jaffe, considered to be the founder of the Jewish community. He opened a linen house in Belfast and his business prospered. The linen trade expanded and more German merchants joined Daniel and his family. But it was his son Otto, you can see here, who developed and established the community's influence and prestige. And they were incredibly generous with their time and money supporting commercial and religious life, not only Jewish religion, but the wider community in the province. Otto was knighted and became Lord Mayor on 2 occasions. And in recognition of Daniel's contribution, an beautiful ornamental drinking fountain. Here it says in remembrance of Daniel Joseph Jaffe, 1874, and it's situated right in a prominent position in the town centre. Let's go out of here. Yep. Lovely. Now we're back again. So they were the original founders of the community. But in the late 1800s, that heralded the start of the exodus of Russian Jewry, and many families made their way to Ireland. Communities grew in the main cities, and there were also some small satellite communities. People often ask, how did the Jews come to Ireland, of which there are many theories. One possible one is that when the ship stopped at Cork on their way to New York, the ship's captain shouted out, "Cork!" and they all thought he'd said New York, and they all rushed off. Maybe that's one of the reasons. A large majority came from the same couple of shtetls in Lithuania. Someone had an address or a name and others followed. And this is how my grandparents arrived in Ireland. But back to Belfast now. In the early part of the 20th century, the community thrived. Businesses prospered and many community names are represented in the centre of the city. Jewellerers, furniture, music and fur shops, to name a few. There were 2 kosher butchers and Levy's delicatessen, sawdust on the floor and wooden barrels containing pickled and schmaltz herring, sweet and sour cucumbers, and the very kind Mrs. Levy would offer you a taste of smoked salmon when you came into the shop. Education has always been of great importance, and some of the children of these early settlers became lawyers and doctors. And my own father, being the first Jewish doctor to practice in Belfast, having qualified at Queen's University. Many held high positions in their professions. Music and the arts were also very well represented. Politics was avoided. I didn't finish it, did I? Hold on. Right. Now, just going to share the screen again with you here. Okay, what have we got? Just a second, we're coming up with it. Right. So I'm sure you recognize this picture here. And I can say that Belfast is extremely proud to have been the birthplace of Chaim Herzog. You can see him here. Born in 1918, his father, Rabbi Israel Herzog, later became the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel. So just a few years ago, to celebrate the 100 years since Chaim's birth, the Herzog family visited Belfast and Dublin. Isaac Herzog, today's president, together with many family members, visited the house where Chaim was born, and receptions were held in the community centre and in the Belfast Parliament. This is Stormont that you hear a lot about in the news. Right, and a portrait of Chaim was commissioned, presented to the community, and Ian Paisley, MP, presented Isaac Herzog with a traditional blackthorn stick, a shillelagh. So here's all the Herzogs here, as you can see. Right, now let's stop sharing, get back again. Where are we? Right. It's worth also mentioning that during World War II, a young Abba Iban, born Aubrey Solomon, came to also live in the city. Another famous resident was a Mayor Wolof, who later became Maxim Levitnov, and he became foreign minister to Stalin. And even Gustav Wolff of Harland and Wolff fame was born Jewish. During World War II, the community established a hostel in the city for escaping Nazi refugees, and later bought some land and created a kibbutz-style farm in Malal County Down, not far from the city, housing some 300 Kindertransport and displaced persons. And this continued till 1948. Well, I suppose you're wondering when I'm coming into this story. I was born in 1948, my father having been born in 1903. And after his 2 sisters were settled, he decided it was time to find a wife for himself. While visiting his sister in Dublin, he met my mother and they married in 1946. There was a lot of intermarriage between the 2 communities. My brother joined us in 1952 and we lived very happily amongst many Jewish and non-Jewish neighbours. It was a wonderful life, very carefree, no locks on the front door in those days. The community had the perfect infrastructure, the synagogue, the Cheder building, and in 1926, a purpose-built building with tennis courts was bought, and this was for all our social and cultural needs, and with a kosher restaurant. A large ballroom catered for wedding receptions, bar mitzvahs, dances, and public meetings. Even on Yom Tov, it was a venue for an overflow service. Such was the size of the community. The wider community accepted us. I had many friends, Jewish and non-Jewish. I never experienced any anti-Semitism. On Shabbos, it was Shul in the morning and B'nai Akiva in the afternoon. Also, I joined my very first committee, Younger JNF, and look where that led. The Belfast Royal Academy was the school where the majority of children went. We had our own Jewish service in the morning and even a Jewish head boy. 10 years ago, we held a large community reunion. Former members came from all over the world to celebrate our heritage and be part of our warm and nurturing group. As you're probably realizing, the community was able to function without any restrictions. Our leaders were greatly respected. Several held high public positions. But of course, this is Northern Ireland, and there was always that religious tension between Protestants and Catholics. Many businesses would only employ their own. Even the small ad column in the local paper would have the letters NRC after a job application. Politics and religion were never discussed with our friends up in our home. Of course, it all boiled over in 1969 when the Troubles started. Just to give you an idea of what impact that had on the community, at its peak in the 50s, community numbers were about 1,500. And by 1971, just 2 years after the Troubles, they numbered about 950. So that's losing about a third. And by 1981, it was about 500. And today there's 80 members left. So they're a small and dedicated group. They continue Jewish life as best they can, even with the well-documented struggle to get kosher meat. The social center is gone, the Cheder building also, and the synagogue has been adapted to accommodate reduced numbers. Thanks to a grant from the Shared History Fund established by the Northern Ireland office, a new project will start to collect material which will tell the story of the community since its inception. We're also very lucky that the community papers are held at Queen's University, the archivist being very keen that the community is remembered. I'm going to share the screen again. And we're going to go to there we are. Now, I'm going to tell you that even in royal circles, we haven't been forgotten. Prince Charles made a visit to the show in 2019. And here he is. It was a great honor for the community that he came. Rabbi Mervis was with him, and there he is there in one of those pictures there. And a lot of civic, local dignitaries as well, parliamentary people. It was quite an occasion as well for the synagogue. And we also have this young man. Now, this young man, I don't know if any of you know who he is, but he's the new head of the Confederation of British Industry, and his name is Tony Danker. He's born in Belfast, and he went to the Belfast Royal Academy like me, but probably came out with many more qualifications than I did. So let's take that away. So now, I'm going to give you, before I sign off, I'm going to give you a plug from the Northern Ireland Tourist Board. And if you're thinking of a few days away, I can't recommend a visit to the province highly enough. There's so much to see. Start in Belfast with the award-winning Titanic exhibition, situated on the slipway where the famous liner was launched. Another excellent trip is the Black Cab Tour. This will give you a history of the Troubles, how it started, and very importantly, what's going on now. And you can see the colourful Protestant and Catholic murals and leave a message on the famous Peace Wall. And of course, for all those Man U fans out there, the George Best House Tour is highly recommended. If you've a little more time, take a trip along the Glens of Antrim, very picturesque, to the spectacular Giant's Causeway with its unique basalt rock formation, and it's now a UNESCO heritage site. There's quite a lot of walking involved in this on this visit. So our advice is, why not stop off at the Bushmills Distillery? It's only 5 miles away for a wee dram or two, and you'll be sure of a true Irish welcome. And Andrew's joining now, and we're going to say Slánse. Thank you.
Enjoy. That was terrific, Lynn. Really good. Yeah, maybe we can all have some travel books as well. Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you.